On the next episode of Painting and Travel, Sarah and Roger visit the Lightner Museum in St. Augustine, Florida. Sarah talks with the curator as Roger paints Rota, a lion on display that was once the mascot to Sir Winston Churchill.
Welcome to historic St. Augustine. This is the courtyard of the Lightner Museum, and it was originally built in 1887 as the Alcazar Hotel. It was very elegant and had resort-style service. But half a century later, in about 1946, it had to find a new life, and it became the Lightner Museum. Now, in a little while, we'll meet Barry Myers, who's the curator here, and he's going to show us a very special desk, as well as introduce us to a very interesting character named Rota. And Roger, I think, has a special painting planned.
I'm excited about painting Rota the Lion, because animals are a good subject, and Rota has some historical significance, so this will give me a good chance to get up close to the lion and look at some good detail of the lion and get started with the painting.
Sounds good. You'll be within safe limits. I'm really glad you could join us. Let's go inside. We're in the Natural History Room, and I'll let Barry make the introductions.
Well, Sarah, this is Rota. He was won as a baby cub by a family in suburban London. And what do you do with a baby cub? Because they grow up to be lions. And so they had a double-walled cage built in the back of their suburban London home. And he grew up there. And the neighborhood kids, he was very popular there. And eventually, World War II was about ready to happen. And so the family was having a hard time feeding themselves, much less this lion. And so they tried to give it to the London Zoo. The London Zoo was having a hard time feeding the animals that they already had, but the only other option was to put Rota down, and they didn't want that to happen. They hit upon the idea of making Rota a mascot for Winston Churchill during World War II, and as a campaign to get people to donate money and food to help feed the animals at the London Zoo, and it was very successful. Rota went on to sire 42 cubs while he was in captivity, and we have a photograph of Mr. and Mrs. Churchill holding the two of Rota's cubs.
And I wonder if his line is still continuing.
You know, that's a good project. I should research that sometime.
Okay, well, we'll get back to you on that.
All right, thank you.
I have a 16 by 20 inch piece of masonite here, and back in my studio I took some cadmium red, a little bit of burnt sienna, squirted that on here, and I put a tone on this board. Now I've drawn out the lion. I don't know exactly what colors to use on this lion. Even when I look at it, it's really hard to determine what colors are there. So I've chosen some earth colors: burnt sienna, yellow ochre, burnt umber. Then I have a blue, which is ultramarine blue, and I have a alizarin crimson. Now inside his mouth, it's all pretty. This is a sort of an old guy here, so a lot of it's a faded. I think some of the color is gone, but I've got some alizarin crimson here because I think I want to make the interior of his mouth a little bit richer in color than what I see. And of course I have titanium white. I don't have too much of a drawing there, but I have enough that I can see the basic lines, and they'll just show through this thin wash of dark colors. You know, I think one of the hardest parts of painting is getting started. And the other really difficult part of a painting is knowing when to stop. That's the two areas of painting that are the most difficult. The first part just takes some motivation, self-motivation. The other part takes some thought in order to know when to stop. Just kind of feeling my way into this right now, because every time I do a painting, no matter how many paintings I've done, it's always a new challenge. It's just, I can't really say to myself, well, this is going to be a breeze, this should be easy. I do often think that well, I should be able to get this painting down pretty quickly. And often I'm fooled by what problems I run into. It's always a bit scary starting out a painting. Like I said, I've done lots of paintings, but there's always that unknown about a painting. Sometimes paintings come off very quickly and they come off just right. Other times they just never do. You just never know. And if they don't, I just start another painting. I think too much of this red is showing through. I think that's one of my problems here. It's bothering me. So I'm going to keep working and putting opaque colors on here. I don't know if this is any more difficult than doing a landscape or not, because really we have the same issues in doing an animal like this as I would in doing a landscape. We have all those elements of the, like I said earlier, composition and drawing. But for me, it's pretty much all the same. It's all about, basically, you get down to basically, it's all about shapes. Not really satisfied with what I've done here today, so I'm going to take some reference photos of the lion, and we'll finish this up in the studio.
This is Barry Myers. He's the curator here. And Barry's going to show us this spectacular desk that looks as though it were built for a king.
Well, Sarah, it was built for Louis Bonaparte, and Louis Bonaparte was Napoleon Bonaparte's brother, and Napoleon made his brother King of Holland, and even though he was an imposed king on another nation, he was actually a very popular king.
And I'd love to see how it operates, because I know there's some hidden secrets here.
Sure, Sarah, let me show you. I'm able to pull the desk chair out.
This is the desk chair.
This is the chair, and the chair back folds up. And then this allows us to access the roll-top desk. And then I have a secret locking mechanism that if I push this button here, it allows me to open up this.
Oh my.
Now, if this doesn't look like enough drawers, these are all false drawers on the front. And there's another secret locking device down here that if I push that, it allows me to open this.
So there's room for everything in this desk.
There is.
It's very organized. Oh, I see.
See all the drawers here?
Yes, they're alphabetized.
Exactly.
Is that an ivory inlay?
This is mother of pearl.
Mother of pearl, even better. And how many drawers altogether?
There are over 200 drawers.
Oh my.
And if you were to allow me to get up here, I'll show you there's another locking device here, which I push, allowing me to open this. And this opens up as well.
And these are also alphabetized.
They're lowercase. This side where you're standing opens as well.
Mm-hmm. Same idea.
Same
here.
idea. A lot of times, in the 19th century, they didn't have electric lighting, so if they were working at night, this is a place for your candle stand.
Barry, I can't help but notice that this desk reminds me of something. Musical instrument?
Well, a pipe organ, and so you're correct. And the clock actually still works. We don't have it running right at the moment. And then what I love is the opera box up above, or it looks like an opera box, and that would originally, you would have had a couple of porcelain figurines.
Oh, I see. So in here, the opera box, over the clock, over the pipe organ.
I think that's a pretty neat.
It's very neat. And the chair, does it house anything other than the chair?
It does. You notice the solid panel in the front.
And what's hidden behind here?
Well, there are 3 more drawers hidden here. This is a false panel. This is actually a timbre door, which, as I lift it up, reveals the drawers.
And I see some decoration here. Is this marquetry?
Yes, this is marquetry and parquetry. The difference being that marquetry is figural or floral, and parquetry is geometric.
What do you think the reason for this particular pattern is?
I think it's just a device to make it look like a vanishing
Would
tile.
it be the stage, or the lower
exactly,
stage?
sort
for
of
the
like
opera?
that. I think that might have been a part of the idea.
Well, I've really enjoyed seeing the desk. It's super spectacular.
Oh, thank you.
Rather than wasting time on trying to correct that painting I started in the museum, I'm going to start a whole new painting. A warm background, like I usually use on my paintings, just didn't work on this. Could be because of all this fur, it just sort of confused the issue with too much texture. So I'm going to start with a blank white background. I have the same colors out of my palette. This time, instead of using acrylics, I'm going to use oils. Now that I'm back in the studio, I'm using some photographs. Like I said earlier, sometimes the hardest part of a painting is knowing when to quit. So I made that decision, and we'll just start over. I think it's a good lesson for me and for everybody. Things don't always work out quite as planned. I don't regret working at the museum because I did get to look at it closely and so on. I can really see now that the texture that I had on my board to begin with at the museum really was confusing as to the placement of this fur, because I had textures going every which way, and now with a clean slate I can position this fur in the direction that it needs to go. But with just these darks, I can get some nice texture. In here I'm using the side of my brush. So I'll begin by just making a tonal painting of this, almost like watercolors. And I'll try and stay away from the white for as long as I can. If I get this too dark with this tonal color, all I have to do is wipe my brush off and pick up some of that paint to make it lighter. There's not a lot of color in this lion, and really at this point I'm not concerned with the color as much as I am the value, trying to get the proper value down. I'll just get this covered here. Right now I'm going to lay this on and then kind of flatten it out. I think this way I can better establish the patterns of light and dark. If that's too dark, if I'm just trying to create my values, I can wipe my brush off, just pick up some of this, or if it's not picking up enough, I can just wipe a little bit off just to get the right values. I'm using basically my burnt umber and ultramarine blue for these darks. Sometimes I'm picking up more of the burnt sienna for a warmer tone. Already I feel a little bit better about this. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes when starting out a painting, right from the beginning, you get the feeling that something isn't going to go right. There, now I can see this plane going much better than I could before. Early on in the painting, I thought a dark background would also help me to figure out the values of this lion. Now I see that that really wasn't the case either. There is just no real recipe for doing paintings. Each painting is so individual all the time. And all this is so subjective anyway. Each painting has to find its own way. I'm starting to feel the form of this lion now, where these planes sort of go in and out and around. I'm going to pick up some red and some yellow ochre. Right down here, there's a lot of warm colors right in his jaw area. I'm staying with this large brush for as long as I can because it prevents me from getting into too much detail right away before I place my large shapes and values. And since this is thin, I can still see some of my pencil lines through this thin paint. With the brush that's stiff, it's easy to create this fur, especially on the edge of the form. Flip this fur out like this, just with the front of my brush holding it straight on. Just flip that out. This lion just does not have much color in it. So I'm going to just continue on with these values, and what I'll concentrate on is, as I look at my photograph, is to try and determine whether it's a warm color or a cool color. And they're all fairly warm colors, but some are just a little bit cooler in comparison with the color next to it. I'm taking yellow ochre and white, and I'm putting in this light part of the eye right there. I'm starting to pick up a tiny bit of white in here. I'm not going to use white very much, but in some of these finer areas, I'm going to use some white now to begin to build this up. Now let's go back and work some more on this fur. These are pretty big, broad strokes right now. I'll start to refine some of those. I'll jump back in with my burnt sienna, burnt umber, touch of ultramarine blue. Just make this dark color again. I'm going to thin it one more time. Start defining these areas of fur. At some points in this painting, I'm actually scraping away some of the paint. That leaves sort of a fur texture there. A nice little wavy pattern to his fur right here. I'm not going to try and follow the photograph exactly on this. So I'm going to put some more blue in there and cool this. I think any warm colors need to be reserved for this mouth and up here. Don't want too much attention brought down here. That also means that I don't need lots of detail down in here. I'll try and suggest it without putting in every little hair and piece of fur. Just pushing this paint around. I'm picking up some paint, leaving the white underneath, just shoving this around, trying to get exactly the texture I'm looking for. I'll just continue with this warm color of the burnt sienna and yellow ochre for these warm passages right up in here. Grab some ultramarine blue. Make this darker right in here. Very dark part of the painting is right behind this ear. I'll darken that. And parts of this ear are lighter. So now I could add white at this point, but I think I'll just wipe my brush off, wash the brush out, and I'll just pick up some of this white from underneath. Just the white of the board. So I pick up a little bit, I wipe my brush off, and I'll just pick up some more. I'm really mashing down on this brush to shove this paint around. I'm actually trying to get rid of some of the texture at this point, sort of flatten it out to feel these planes. Going to work on this area right down here with the lower jaw. We have a very cool color right in here. So I'm going to take the ultramarine blue and a touch of white. Again, I haven't used hardly any white in this painting so far, just a little bit. So I'm using a small brush here. I want this to feel very fleshy looking. Again, I'll take my burnt umber and ultramarine blue. That gives me a very, very dark color. And we've got some very dark passages that are quite hard edge right in here and at the edge of this tooth. I'm going to put one more color out, cadmium red light. Going to make this area right here on the front of his tongue a brighter red. Here we have a pattern of light coming across his tongue. That adds, I think, a needed bit of color to this piece. Well, now I'm down in this area, I might as well work on these teeth here at the top. This one here is catching the light just partly. Ultramarine blue and burnt umber, that'll give me that very dark color. We'll go back up here to the nose. We'll put in this very dark area right there. With this warm pinkish color, We'll lighten that. See here, I'm starting to put small amounts of white in the painting at this point. Here I'm going to make this lighter with some yellow ochre and white. This is a very light part of the painting, right in the front here. A lot of light is hitting it. Just putting this on with a brush that's rather stiff, and that will give me the impression that of this hair on the face. And my brush strokes are just following the lay of this hair. Flip that paint up there into that background area. Make a nice soft looking area. Right down from the eye he has some wrinkles right here. So again, I'll put these in with some white and yellow ochre. And I'll just follow the lay of that hair right down here. I'll leave that dark. That'll be the crease. I'm choosing to paint this quite thin. I'm still able to pick up a lot of these tones from underneath if I choose to. I can just, if I want this lighter and don't want to add the white paint to it, I can just really wipe my brush off and pick up that light color from underneath. Ultramarine blue, burnt umber again, maybe a touch of burnt sienna. Get this dark, warm color. And we've got his whiskers here. So we'll place some dark areas where those whiskers start to protrude. Well, now with a small number 2 brush, I'll take my warm colors here with the white and yellow ochre. I don't want it pure white, but I'm going to put in those whiskers. I'll steady my hand with this stick. Now I could wait till this dries in order to put these in, but seems to be working right now, so I'm going to try and do this all at once here. I've got a few more whiskers. Bend over and come down. One trick in putting this paint over wet paint is to load the brush up with enough paint, quite a bit of paint. I twirl the brush to give me a point, and it has to be, can't be too thick or too thin. It just has to be the right consistency in order to flow over this existing wet paint. Here I can take this light color, we can drag a few whiskers over this way. And he has some above his eyelid here. Boy, these are fun to put in. Well, let's go back up to the eye and work on that. Usually when I paint eyes on animals, I make the eye slightly larger than what I see. And it just gives the creature or animal a little bit more of an endearing quality. So I'm going to make this eye slightly larger. I'm also going to put out one more color. That's cadmium yellow light. I'm going to use that just in the eye. Since this paint is so wet right there, I think I'm going to wipe that out just so the other paint doesn't mix with it. And I'll take this yellow and white. I'm going to make this eye very yellowish color right in here. As you can see in the photograph, this eye is all glazed over. I think it's because of age, glass eye. But we'll make a good strong eye in here. Now I'm going to wipe my brush off extremely well. Pick up some white, twirl that white to get a nice fine point there. And let's put a highlight right on his eye, right at the top there. I'm going to take my ultramarine blue with white and add some blue right at the top of that. Not that he has a blue eye, but if this line were outside, this eye would be reflecting some light from the sky, which would be blue. I hope you can see this on your video because it's very subtle here. And I'll put a few more hairs coming up into this area above his eyelid. I'll dip into my white and yellow again. I'm going to put a highlight on the top of this right in there. And we'll try it on the other side too, right? Just a touch right there. Since that highlight is so bright, almost white, I'm going to lighten these areas just so it doesn't stand out quite as much. It'll still be as light, but by lightening some of these areas around it, it won't bring quite as much attention to it, yet it'll still give it that nice impact. Now, if I want to add some details with some individual hairs, I can do that with this small brush, but I definitely don't need to do it in all these areas along here. I really don't need a lot of detail down in here. Maybe just around here might be enough. And often a few little strokes can suggest enough for the viewer to assume and think that there's detail in the whole painting when there's actually not. There can be just enough detail in the right place for the viewer to think that the whole painting is very detailed. Now this is where the viewer's eye is going to go. There's quite a bit of detail in there. I could put more, don't know if I need it. And also by having quite a bit of detail in this area, it will actually keep the viewer's eye and interest up in this area. If there were too much detail down in here, the eye would tend to want to travel everywhere in the painting. I want to keep the viewer's interest focused right in this area. So that's why I'm just adding a few little extra hairs and detail right up in here. Well, a painting like this, I could easily spend hours and hours and hours on it, refining it more and more. But I think we're about out of time, so I'm going to call it quits on this. So let's take one last look.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.